Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're going to be talking about how to continuously deliver your platform with concourse. So let me introduce myself first. So my name's Ryan. I've been working at Pivotal for about 3 years now, on several different projects. My latest project is this team, which we call Customer Zero. It's a cross-disciplinary team of developers and solution architects, all with the common goal of finding new, better ways of performing platform operations, primarily by treating infrastructure as code. And Concourse has been a great tool for us in that regard. And I have Brian here as well.
Brian Kirkland, I'm the Cloud Foundry technical lead at Verizon.
Cool. So first, let me talk a little bit about the culture at Pivotal, in case some of you are not familiar with our work culture. It's really unlike any other IT culture that I've worked with before. At Pivotal, we are, some might say, fanatic about no QA, meaning that there is no dedicated person, no dedicated team for manual quality assurance testing anywhere at Pivotal. In short, we believe it's pretty counterproductive to have someone review and test code that they, A, never built themselves, i.e. as the developer, or B, never asked for in the first place. Typically, at Pivotal, we have product managers who ask for these features as requirements. So there's too much loss of context in the handoff from QA to or from other people. And also, there's too much opportunity here to automate some of the processes that QA has to go through. So at Pivotal, we landed on this approach where pretty much all new features are what we call accepted by the product managers themselves, which means that once the feature is built, it will actually check that it works according to how they expected it would, and then accept it based on that. And any regression testing is done by automated tests, which are built by primarily the developers. And this ensures that new features are always checked by the actual person who asked for the new function in the first place before they're shipped. And we still automate as much as possible the testing of features we know worked in the past. So taking this a step forward, we also take this mantra of maximized automation and reducing interpersonal handoffs with us into the theme of continuous integration and continuous delivery. And at Pivotal, we build a lot of very, very complicated software. For those of you who are familiar with our software that you can get off of PivNet, you know that some of the products are 6 to 7 gigabyte files. And that's a lot of code. So that has to be pieced together from a lot of different components, even before it's tested and validated. So with all these pieces we have to put together, and all those tests that we either want to run in parallel or in succession, we have a very, very complicated and repetitive and long CI/CD process. So we took a lot of different CI/CD tools in the beginning. This was around the time that I joined Pivotal. We evaluated Jenkins, ThoughtWorks CD, and they were all pretty good. None of them really had all the characteristics that we were looking for in our system. Specifically, we wanted really good visibility into the end-to-end workflow of the process that we are CI/CDing. And we regularly had these processes that were or perhaps a dozen or more tasks long. So it was very difficult to kind of see the overall process from a CI perspective. And then when you're running a failed task, it was hard to determine if it was safe to rerun as is, or if you had to inspect previous tasks that had run to address earlier issues. For example, let's say you're installing a series of software components, and each being dependent on the prior component that was installed, and you hit a failure. You need to determine if you can simply rerun the last task that ran and try to install a particular component, or if you need to inspect what happened in the last installation. And secondly, file inspection was a big concern for us. So if this job, say, builds this artifact, which put it somewhere, where is it? So for example, if Brian wrote a CI script that creates an artifact, and I don't know how that script works, and I'm the one who one day sees the running script produce a bad egg, where do I go find that bad egg, right? And then once I think I found it, am I sure that this is the bad egg? Is it a good egg? If I want the latest good egg, how do I find the last good egg? So it's also good to have versioning, as well as a very standard approach to basically storing these files that are going through the system. And lastly, we found that we were rewriting the same external integrations again and again. So every team had written their own S3 classes, their own Docker or Git integration plugins, and it just was not efficient, right? There was a lot that could be shared. So we really wanted a sort of chain-linked architecture where each link represents a job, which in the end is the end-to-end structure is what we would call a pipeline. And then also files, or resources, as we'll call them, are first-class artifacts. And so if you treat them with the respect they deserve, then when the time comes for debugging what went wrong in your CI, you'll find them when you need them. And that's essentially what we mean by first-class citizens. So a little bit on the anatomy of a pipeline. The job is the essential building block of the pipeline. It's that square that's gray colored, gray indicating that it's never been run before in this particular case. It's comprised of tasks, which are essentially your CI/CD scripts, and it has a predetermined input and output and conditions for basically passing or failing. So triggers and resources are the terms that Concourse uses. And most importantly, it can be rerun, and you know exactly where this job is relative to other jobs thanks to this pipeline architecture. Resources themselves are often these version files. So those are the first-class artifacts we talked about earlier. The scheduler, interestingly enough, is also a resource. It's a resource called time, essentially turning this job ahead of it, the regulator, into a cron job, which we'll talk a little bit more later. So now we have a set of resources that really anyone can use, such as Git resources, Docker resources, S3 resources, et cetera. There's about a dozen resources that Concourse supports kind of out of the box. But then there are probably 100 or so resources that the community has contributed. And that has been a huge boon to us. We're no longer rewriting a bunch of integrations that other systems have, or other APIs already have available. So now let's take a step back and say I'm the platform team, and I want to know what can Concourse do for me. So just a little bit of history here. Within R&D, around 2015, 2016, we had a lot of success with Concourse internally. We were using it pretty much with every team that was building a product for PCF. So we decided, well, why not try this with some of our customers and see if they can make use of this also. The key here is that there's a Pivotal Network resource. So Pivotal Network, as I mentioned earlier, is how we distribute our products. So that's a resource that takes advantage of the PivNet API to get the latest versions of your software. That was kind of the starting point for us to begin a fully automated vendor-consumer relationship. And then we started with patch updates as the first activity that we wanted to pipeline. Those we saw as the most opportune to be automated since their deltas are relatively small. So there's a low risk of any unexpected changes. And they usually contain the most time-sensitive updates, usually security, such as patching Heartbleed or something very bad that you do not want to be on your platform for long. And there are definitely a lot of patches that, especially if you're using PCF, we publish a lot of patches, and sometimes up to once a week. So there's a big benefit here to apply patches faster than your typical human response time. And there's a low cost, low risk to automate. So that's why patch updates were one of the first activities to automate. Installs were the next most attractive because most installs should be more or less the same. Consistency is really key, and robots are a lot better at consistency than humans are. And there's a lot of manual effort that can be repeated. So if any of you have tried installing PCF yourselves, you know that sometimes there's a lot of steps there, and that's pretty error prone. All right, so this is an example of the upgrade pipeline. It triggers on two conditions. One, that there is a tile available on PivNet. So that was the PivNet resource we were talking about. And then there's the scheduled resource, which we talked about earlier. That's set by a user. So you can essentially set it to say, I want this update to be scheduled on Tuesdays at 5 p.m., whatever you may desire. And the actual tile update happens in the next few jobs. The first one there is actually downloading and then uploading that tile up to your platform. And then the next job after that is hitting apply changes, which in Ops Manager, for Ops Manager is basically saying, accept this new software update and install it. The next one is definitely a lot more complicated. This is the install pipeline, but you can see how the pipeline architecture is really beneficial in a case like this when there's so many tasks that have to be done in succession as well as some in parallel. So what this is doing essentially is deploying Ops Manager, runtime, the metrics tile, and then also doing some pre-install and post-install jobs that a user can employ to run, say, tests or do any other pre-setup needed. So what else? There's a lot that we think that Concourse can help us do and automate from a platform perspective. So updates and provisioning new environments and new capacities is what we've talked about. But monitoring definitely can be automated. Maintaining the network topology, so opening up new firewall rules, adding new routes, those could be provisioned with Concourse pipelines. We've seen folks use a tool called CF Management. I don't know if most of you are familiar with Cloud Foundry, but managing orgs and spaces via Git PRs. So there are some pipelines for those as well as taking backups of the system at a regular basis and maybe even restoring the platform. But I may be slightly biased. I work at Pivotal, so you should definitely talk to someone who's done this before, which is why Brian is here.
Thank you, Ryan. All right, so I'm Brian Kirkland. I'm the Cloud Foundry platform lead at Verizon. So just a little bit about Verizon. It's a big company, Fortune 15 company. Most people, when they think of Verizon, you think of cell phones, but there's a lot more to Verizon than that. It's got its wireless, it's got a wireline, it's got the Fios home broadband on the East Coast. It has Yahoo and AOL under the new Oath brand for media and advertising. Go90, there's an Internet of Things platform, and there's a Verizon Enterprise Services division as well. So it's a very large enterprise, and it has a very large enterprise IT shop behind that. So a bit about my team. We handle the Cloud Foundry platform operations and the infrastructure for all the lines of business for enterprise IT. We are the first line of support for troubleshooting Cloud Foundry platform issues and application issues that involve the foundations. We provide architecture guidance to app teams. There's a large spectrum of apps from your greenfield microservice-ready applications to applications that might be in the process of deconstructing their monolith to run on Cloud Foundry. So we're the first line of support or first line of contact to show them how Cloud Foundry is different from a traditional deployment. And we do this for all lines of business. So it's a lot of customers rely on us, and we're really busy. So a bit about the old enterprise way. Anyone who comes from a large enterprise shop is probably familiar with kind of the change adverse mindset that used to kind of permeate. No one, we had to make the case, and part of like the DevOps transformation at Verizon was moving from, the more traditional patch every 6 months to now, we can push out patches weekly, and that's where kind of Concourse comes in to help. Also, off-hours maintenance. So, a lot of our changes had to be done at night, but now, with Cloud Foundry, it's a shared platform, and there's no one change window that pleases everyone. So what we pushed for was to do changes during the day. We've found that Cloud Foundry is resilient enough to let us do changes during the day. And then long lead times. All the paperwork that goes into pushing a production change through, you can build automation around that as well. So we feel like we broke the mold. We've done a lot of work this year to get to the point where we watch concourse pipelines run and upgrade our environments using the PCF pipelines. And I say at the bottom, the risk is no longer change, it's lack of change. And we've seen kind of moving from the old model to the new that we actually have less problems, less support tickets, less outages, because we're keeping our platform more up to date. We don't fall behind anymore, and this automation helps us stay up to speed. So as if Mondays weren't bad enough, our team earlier this year, Mondays were maintenance Mondays. It was Monday nights, we would pick a foundation and do all of the upgrades for all of the tiles on that foundation. The next week, we would do the same thing again on the next foundation. When you support 12 or 16 foundations, that becomes an unsustainable model and burns out your operation people. So we were very motivated to get our nights back. So we looked at, what are we spending the most time on, and where can we automate? So for us, that was upgrades. The three big things about upgrades are that they're time consuming. An elastic runtime upgrade for us can take 12 to 24 hours. We deliberately kind of slow them down. I think by default, the elastic runtime will upgrade 4% of your Diego cells at the same time. We turn that down to 1. So it's literally upgrading 1 VM at a time, and when you have 100 or 200 VMs, that can take longer than you want to stay awake. The other part of upgrades is they're repetitive. You're doing the same thing every time. You're pulling the code down from Pivotal, you're uploading it to your foundation, you're applying changes. You pull down stem cells if stem cells need upgraded, and then you do this for every tile, and then you do this for every foundation. That is boring. And then upgrades are constant. They're constantly coming out. We upgrade a tile, and a week later, there's a new release. So how can we keep all of this in motion, stay up to date? And that's where the PCF pipelines came in. So now I'll show off the tile upgrade pipeline, show you how it's in the wild. All right, so this is our concourse lab environment. So I had a video, because I can't show a live demo of this because the process will take 3 or 4 hours. So this is our concourse lab environment. I had a video to show kind of like 3 hours condensed into 5 minutes, but it didn't show up very well on the screen. So I'm just going to step through a successful run of the pipeline, and you can see kind of how this pipeline works. So zoom in here. So it starts with the regulator. That's where you set, when do you want the upgrade to run. For our lab, we have it running every 30 minutes. So as soon as Pivotal releases some code, our lab will get it in 30 minutes. The next step is the upload and staging of the tiles. So this is where it downloads the Pivotal product. In this case, in this example, this is RabbitMQ 1.9.9. Pulls down that file, talks to Ops Manager, uploads the tile and the stem. There's a stem cell upgrade in this example as well. Uploads that, and then it stages it. So in this example, we started at we were at RabbitMQ 1.9.5, and we were jumping to 1.9.9. So staging it just, if for anyone who hasn't used Ops Manager, it's saying on the next apply changes, these changes are going to get pushed through, and because of the stem cell upgrade, it's going to touch some other tiles as well and upgrade the underlying stem cell for them, which can add time if you're doing this manually. So after all of those steps, it comes to apply changes. So it's it's interacting with the Ops Manager API, and it's essentially just hitting that apply change button that you would hit as an administrator, and then it goes. And then, when we do this on our real environments, this is just the lab. We add a Datadog event resource at the end, or in between. So if any of the steps fail, we generate an event so we can get a notification on that. There's an email resource as well out there, and that works pretty well. And then just, so as far as setting up the pipeline, it's really, really simple. This is what the YAML file boils down to. I took out all the commenting, but you essentially throw it a API token to interact with PivNet. You tell it the versions you're looking for. In this case, it's looking for 1.9.star. You pass it your Ops Manager username, password, IP address or domain, infrastructure, and the product slug, they call it. In this case, PRabbitMQ. And this works for every tile I've tried. Every tile that we use, even non-pivotal tiles, as long as the code's out there on PivNet, this will pull it down. So it's made a lot of, I'm sure it's not just our team, but it's made a lot of PCF operators really happy, and we can do better things. We can take that time and help our application teams on board instead of dealing with infrastructure all the time, infrastructure upgrades. That's
cool. And you have build pack updates too, as well as tile?
Yeah, we've played around with it for build packs. That's going to be a big project for us coming up.
Yep.
Is getting that more organized.
I still remember when Brian told me he could watch Monday Night Football again after these pipelines were put up. So yeah, if you want to catch up on the game, how you're doing this.
Oh,
yeah, that's
not
still
done.
yours.
So what's next for us with Concourse and PCF pipelines is we just talked about the build packs. We're getting more and more requests for application teams to kind of customize the build pack, and so we'd like to build our own pipelines that can take build packs that application teams tweak and compile them and get them out there to all of our foundations. We want to use it for backup and recovery, like Ryan said, for security. There are use cases where let's pull down a stem cell and run a suite of tests against it before we put it out into the real world. Right now, a lot of companies trust that Pivotal does this, and the stem cells are secured, but we want to start building our own pipelines to do our own detection. And then upgrading Concourse with Concourse, I thought would be an interesting thought experiment.
It works.
It works. Automate the automator. And then I haven't played with the new, a PCF build from scratch yet. We just haven't built a new foundation since those pipelines came out. So looking to jump into that one next year. The thought that you could just define a Cloud Foundry foundation in a YAML file and hit play on a Concourse pipeline and have a fully deployed 12-tile Cloud Foundry foundation is a really cool concept. So,
thank you.
Yep.
All right, so I'm sure, you have a question? Yes. Oh.
We haven't at Verizon, but I think there was another talk in this room where they were talking about that, and that probably works pretty well. We'll probably be doing that here shortly. Oh, really?
It's definitely probably the more complicated upgrade because there is interaction with your IaaS. I don't know, are you on vSphere or? Oh, okay, so working with, so we use a lot of Terraform to do IaaS paving and instantiation of new VMs before the existence of Bosch, we'll say, in that phase. So there's no Terraform provider for vSphere yet. I know the Bubble team, and I see Evan there in the back, is working on that. But for now, we're using what I think VMware calls the GoVC API. We'd like to get consistency between all the platforms, though, and kind of use a single technology. But yeah, we should talk after if you're having issues. So what's our roadmap for pipelines? Well, I'm sure you all, if you were in the morning session today, you probably saw the announcement from Ansi Fakori about pipelines going GA, which we're really excited about. Not everything on my team, the customer zero, becomes products. We kind of dabble in new tools and new ways of doing things. So they only really pick the things that worked from us and turn those into products. So we're really excited. This is kind of a symbolic win for our team. Hopefully sometime early next year, maybe even sooner, all of you will see that available on Pivotal Network. So we have a lot of great ideas for new features. First would be the offline automation, which we find would be most helpful for platforms that need to be really completely isolated from the outside world. Like, no joke, no you walk into a hallway, do a retina scan, walk into a room that's kind of airlocked, and you have your USB key with whatever software you want to install. So those are customers that you definitely, the automation model starts to break down, right? Every time you have to have physical people carrying in software. So what I think the best that we can do in that scenario is at least automate the collection of software in the online environment. So essentially building a tar ball generator for all the software that you need. And then on the offline environments, you'll have automation that basically distributes that, unpacks that tar file, checks all that signatures and hashes of the contents, and distributes those files to whatever internal file store you have. Then the other thing would be more install options. So right now, we really just offer Ops Manager, Elastic Runtime installation, and then perhaps a couple of tiles, which are very PCF specific. We would like to add many more tiles and then many other kinds of software. So right now, for example, we're working on a NSX setup pipeline for eventual use in PCF. And then we'd also like to add more configuration options into these pipelines so that you can choose what kinds of network topology you'll have on your IaaS or what kinds of options you'll select in the tiles for different configurations. And then multi-PCF management is a big one. So most people who have PCF will have multiple instances. Brian mentioned he has about 12 right now. So you're going to have a lot of pipelines. Fortunately, managing those pipelines by hand is still easier than managing all those foundations by hand. But you would still like to abstract away some of that manual work that you may be doing repetitively. So we're looking at ways to do kind of end-to-end management of all of your foundations, your entire platform, even outside PCF, with pipelines. And there are two schools of thought here, right? One example would be to just build one pipeline, one concourse instance, and concourse would be able to communicate with other environments via workers that just do a reverse SSH tunnel back to the sort of mothership of concourse, which we call ATC. And then you end up with this giant pipeline. Some customers have tried that, and it's worked well for them. Others would prefer to have sort of distributed pipelines and have a tool that kind of generates and maintains those pipelines. And we've explored a tool that does something like that as well, called Maestro, which Luciano, I see in the audience, was the main author. So we're still figuring that out. And then major upgrades, definitely now that we've seen success with the patch upgrades, a lot of major upgrades have been causing issues for some people. So having some automation and some fallback capability that could be built into pipelines would be very attractive there as well too. But there's a lot more at stake there for major upgrades, so we definitely want someone to be witnessing what is happening in the major upgrade, or at least aware of what's going to be happening in their environments. The very minimum we could do there is at least automate all of the steps that once you've approved an upgrade, for instance, and agreed to the configurations that will be applied, all you have to do is hit a button and the rest is automated. So what's the big picture here, right? So I think this fits very well into what we've been messaging at Pivotal as the circle of code, where you start with an idea, you build out that idea, you have stories and tracker which map to that idea, and then you build it or you add whatever new feature you want to add. That built app is then auto-pushed with concourse, a new feature, or say it's a new feature, then it's just part of an auto-update. And then the platform, PCF in this case, would auto-manage that app. And you have feedback systems such as monitoring metrics or any kind of data analysis, which gives you hints for what kind of new features you want to add in the future. So that's the circle of code concept. Some of you probably heard this before, but it's worth repeating. So I really, truly believe that this circle of code idea is enabled by having automation pretty much at every level of your cloud stack. So we aim to make the path to production for your app as seamless and unhindered as possible. I think that's what the transforming how the world builds software message really boils down to. Cloud Foundry has been the app developers' bread and butter for the last few years, and now Kubernetes is, of course, joining the party. Those are essentially, they have essentially the same main responsibility, which is to orchestrate your containers. So pushing apps, auto-updating apps, resurrecting failing apps, and then rebalancing workloads to healthy machines, which could be pods, could be VMs, whatever you want to call it. And then there's the Bosch and IaaS technologies, which could be vSphere, could be GCP, or any of the other cloud provider software that you see out there. Those will auto-manage your machines, which your apps rely upon. So pushing new machines, basically the same thing, just with machines, where you have apps before. And then what we're starting to discover is that with Concourse, it's possible to automate IT systems. It's possibly the toughest to automate here, though, because, well, so at Pivotal, we dove into Cloud Foundry and Bosch and Kubernetes because we immediately recognized these as pretty much valuable at every IT organization in the world, and pretty reusable as well for anyone, regardless of whether you're a bank or telecom or manufacturer, retail, insurance, et cetera. But IT systems are slightly different because your corporate culture has been embedded into how your IT systems work. It's kind of Conway's law in a way. For example, you might have dev, test, and prod teams, dedicated teams for each of those environments, and that's just how it's done at your company. And that's a specific flavor of an IT workflow. Or you might have one team that handles everything that touches networks, and another team that handles everything that touches storage. And that's another flavor of sort of IT organization and responsibilities. So having one concourse pipeline in today's world, I don't think would solve the problems of everyone in this room, because there's a difference in the separations of responsibilities for everyone. But I truly believe that we're at least building sort of the Lego blocks for a more DevOpsy world. I like to reuse the concept of the microservices architecture here, because if we think about it in the IT operations world, we can at least make very specific tasks kind of standards as tasks or jobs. And then we can write our own pipelines, which are essentially how we orchestrate these services in any manner we choose. And so we're getting much closer to that approach today, thanks to these pipelines. And with that, I am done very early. So any questions? Yes?
How do you handle config updates, like if you want to say you want to change the number of tables
Seriously?
During the upgrades, I don't know whether they support just a config update rather than an upgraded version.
Currently, no, we don't have a pipeline template for that, but that's a good idea. We should definitely explore that. The way we see it is that for activities like that, your objective is to do something that's a manual task, right? You may want to set the cells at a specific level or a specific configuration. What we're actually have been exploring recently is how to, say, auto-scale the cells or the routers in response to, say, increased load or increased traffic. But for something that you are intentionally wanting to do, I think it's fine to go into Ops Manager. There's no need to try to pipeline that, unless it's something that's a very long process. But yeah, we should talk about that. Yes?
Are you looking at doing anything with settings? I know there's a lot of OpsMan APIs for settings, and I do things.
Mm-hmm.
I have a YAML document with my desired state for those settings.
Yeah.
And I can apply it consistently across all my environments instead of having people log on.
Yeah.
I would not want anybody to have to log on to Ops Manager during an upgrade.
Yeah.
And then, if it's environment specific, I'll have a variable in my desired state so that it can get it from our configuration management software. So I'm just looking at sometimes you get a tile upgrade and the configuration has to be answered, right? The tile goes orange on a dot release because you have to change the
Yeah.
configuration.
So yeah, and sorry, I should have been repeating the question. So the question there was about configuring a tile in anticipation of a new tile configuration that gets introduced as part of a new release of that tile. Yeah, so we've been hurting from that too, because we're trying to keep a foundation up to date, or several foundations up to date on our end. What we've been trying to do is to get the tile authors, the product teams there, to kind of provide sort of a machine-readable configuration metadata of some type that could then be kind of read by a pipeline to then apply the default settings and maybe warn an operator that, hey, this new change is coming. Are you sure this is the default setting? Would you like to change it to something else? I think so the MVP, I think that we'll start with is first just extracting tile configuration out of pipelines, because right now they're very, very deeply embedded, at least in the ones that Pivotal is building, so that configuration file is a separate file that can be modified sort of with pull requests in some sort of source control management system, as opposed to having to kind of dig through all the pipeline scripts to figure out what exactly is being configured. Yes? Yeah.
I would advocate that point releases should never change configuration options. Add,
Yep.
I actually thought that was the case.
Yes.
or a major change.
Yes.
Point releases.
Yeah, so the question is about, so patch releases, the argument is that, and it's a very valid argument, that patch releases should never have configuration changes added. Unfortunately, there are sometimes security changes that do require some configuration. That's
That's a minor. That's not a patch.
yeah, that's true. We can talk about that after this. But yes, this is not the first time we brought this up. Yes.
So when I looked at concourse scripts, like or manifests,
Mm-hmm.
I see a lot of bash scripting in there.
Yeah.
To what extent does your choice of resources diminish that requirement?
So the question is, to what extent do your choice of which resources that you pick for your pipeline would do away with bash scripting? Well, so for example, is there any, are these PCF pipelines that you're talking about in particular, or your own, or just pipelines in general?
I'm just wondering whether I need to use the OM tool,
Yeah.
whether I can use a resource to do that lifting for me.
So that you don't have to download the OM tool?
Yeah, I guess there's a progression towards using resources
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to hard coding or coding the stuff yourself.
Okay, so using something other than OM to be configuring the PCF software, or? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so like an own resource. That's, oh, okay. That's a good idea. I haven't thought about that. But yeah, we should definitely consider that. Right now, we package Ohm with the pipelines. And so once you download the pipelines, the pipelines they reference themselves and they'll download themselves, so they'll also take Ohm from that package. So we're kind of piggybacking off of the PivNet resource to get the Ohm resource for now. But yeah, we should definitely consider that. You're right.
So the configuration of the panels in the tiles,
Mm-hmm.
it's not always immediately clear how that convoy should be structured. To use an analogy, in Cloud Foundry, if I have an application I want to build a manifest, I can ask you to tell me what it looks like.
Yeah.
And build me a manifest and I can manage that from that point in time. Is there something similar that I can use against the tiles to say, please describe yourself? I want to
Okay, yeah, so the question was, how can I basically fetch all of the metadata from a tile in a way that's pretty legible, I guess, comparable to it. So you can fetch it and then also upload a configured, say, manifest for a tile. Yeah, so that's, as I mentioned earlier, what we're next focusing on is figuring out how to extract all of the metadata that is relevant to a tile out of the pipeline so it's not hardwired in there. And then what you would end up with is just a template file, which right now I think you can, there is an ops manager command to get that template file. I'll have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure there is. But yes, that doesn't map to what a pipeline would then put up to configure that. Yes? Is the GA going to support 2.0? That's the plan, yeah. Yes?
There's a question for Brian. Brian, how many, two-part question, how many foundations Verizon, how many PCI foundations Verizon has today? And what, I mean, in terms of productivity after PCI pipelines started being used, how much time do you guys save?
Okay, so the first question was how many foundations we're running currently. We're currently running 12. We have some on-prem VMware and an AWS. The second question was how much time has PCF pipelines saved us? A fair amount of times. I can watch Monday Night Football again. We also have smoke test pipelines running. So when a concourse job is running, doing an upgrade, that smoke test is still running. So I have confidence as an operator that I'll get an alert if either the upgrade fails or if the upgrade breaks something, the smoke test will tell me that it's failing. So we still kind of watch these jobs as they go. We're not just letting these things run without even checking. We have large foundations and a lot of customers. So, but overall, like I can kick off a job and enjoy my evening versus kind of babysitting more than I need to. So, cool. Yep.
More of an operations and a concourse question. You mentioned restricting the number of VMs in flight changing.
Yeah.
Why?
We had issues early on when that number was set to 10%, and it was hard-coded number. Partially, for various reasons, taking 8 Diego cells out at a time. If there are applications out there that are only scaled to 2, there's potential to rip that whole app down. Sometimes it was load on our vCenters. Doing 8 at a time just sometimes cause some timeouts or things like that. So slowing it down to 1 has drastically increased the length of time it takes to do an upgrade, but it drastically increases the chance that that upgrade is going to go through and succeed. So kind of a two-fold answer there. In our AWS environments, sometimes we roll with the 4% value because we're just more confident in the success rate there?
Yes,
Do you have any plans to combine the tile upgrades, like in terms of doing more than one tile upgrade?
yeah. So I can go to the upgrade pipeline to show you what I mean. So that apply changes job at the end, right? We've purposely separated that. It used to be combined with the other job. This would allow us, I think, to add multiple pipelines that all upload and stage tiles, and then you would just have basically one job to hit apply changes. Let's say you're constantly uploading tiles throughout the week, and then you want upgrades to happen on Thursday night, let's say. So you could schedule that to happen on Thursday night, and whatever tiles were added, they'll all be added at once. It wouldn't complain about pending change.
Any pending changes on Ops Manager or do any more upgrades on Ops Manager? Like 1 week.
So, for example, if there's
You uploaded a new stage file
yeah.
and put it on a different pipeline. At that point, it has many changes.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So this job could be changed slightly so that these pipelines, all they would do is add the tiles into, I'm not sure how the terminology is, but they're in the right-hand side of I guess the left-hand side of the Ops Manager, where they're not on the main dashboard, which I guess is staged. So this apply changes could also stage all the tiles as well. Yeah.
Is there any plans to deploy stem cell updates in a more granular fashion?
Yes. That has been a common ask, and we're definitely looking into that too. Yeah. You're talking about floating stem cells specifically? Yeah. So the question was, how can I update stem cells more granularly? This is actually something the Ops Manager team is looking at to basically opt in to these floating stem cells, so that you're not forced to update the entire world with one stem cell.
We've had experience installing a new tile, minimum version of that stem cell. Oops, we got a
Yeah. Yep. Right. So as the Ops Manager team, that's made that one of their top priorities. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so that is that's related to what. So the question was, how do I tie the conclusion of one pipeline to the initiation of another pipeline, right? So we've seen this ties back to what we were talking about earlier of multi-PCF management. It could be multi-tile management also within a foundation. We've seen several different ways of folks doing this. Some will just create one large pipeline. Some would have the one pipeline update a resource that then updates the next pipeline. For example, you might have a dev environment, which if all the tests pass, it'll add the file that it downloaded from, say, PivNet or wherever else, and put it in the internal file store that the prod pipeline then knows, indicates to the prod pipeline that it should download that and start installing it on the prod environment, if that makes sense. So you kind of change together the. Mm-hmm.
Apply pipeline 1, pipeline 2, pipeline, and they all get tied together. Something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, currently in Concourse, pipelines have no knowledge of each other, which is good and bad. I think the Concourse team has received that request before, and I will have to double check with them if they have any means of creating, say, distributed locks amongst pipelines or somehow tying together pipelines once you fly up them, as you said. But yeah, yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I've seen integrations with Vault and CredHub. I haven't seen an example where you can enter the pipeline at run. Okay. Okay. Okay, yeah, so the question was, how do I enter in a password at runtime? A runtime input, yeah, which Jenkins has. I see the concourse team here, so I'm definitely going to ask them about that after this. Good question, though. Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah.
Question for Brian. How often do you see issues with your upgrade pipelines? And also, do you see issues where they work fine in these three platforms, but it's not working in this platform?
Yeah, you know, each environment. Yeah, but typically it's like it's never a concourse issue. It's never a Cloud Foundry issue. It's always like an infrastructure error. Maybe the AWS APIs weren't responding well at that time, or maybe the vCenter wasn't responding well at that time. That's typically what we see when a pipeline fails. As far as like an error rate, I don't know, maybe 10%.
So still low enough you can improve.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, any other questions? No? Well, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.